3 straight years of Czechia breaking Canada's heart, and we still needed Mitch Marner to bail us out in overtime. If sorry is our national word, then why are we in overtime is our national anthem? I can't take this sport anymore. Gold medal, let's go! Welcome back to On the Fly. We're previewing the predicting, recapping World Junior Championships, our Men's World Championships, the Women's World Championship, the U18 Men's World Championship. Expect the unexpected.
Absolute abomination of the Canadian Junior National Team.
I have a couple extra words I want to use in that one. And it's Freebird. Freebird, Freebird, Freebird. Of course, the Olympics are just around the corner. I'm going to coin it the rivalry day.
World Junior history!
Your home for international hockey. This is On the Fly. Hello everyone, welcome back to On the Fly. Here recapping quarterfinal action from the men's Olympic hockey event happening in Milano and Cortina, Italy. So we'll hop into today starting with the scores from today's game, starting with a 6-2 victory for Slovakia over Germany. Now, in this one, it was a bit of a tale of 3 periods, but in reality, the Slovaks really dominated most of this game. Early on, we saw the Germans kind of battling their way through, getting clogged down a little bit with respect to that Slovakian defensive system. But they did still have the majority of the offensive zone time. As the game went onward, though, we slowly but surely saw the Slovaks kind of find their offensive groove and really start to take control. They found some success with the scoring, and there was a few quick goals that really kind of turned the tide in this one. And for a team like the Slovaks, where you're not necessarily that favorite coming out of the gate, it was a relatively even matchup. You always look to some of your key players to kind of lead that charge, whether it be Juraj Slafkovský, whether it be Dalibor Dvorsky. And with Slafkovský going down, I was very interested to see what that response was going to be, whether or not, of course, for the Slovaks, they're going to be able to kind of rebound and bounce back from one of their best players being hurt. He's fine and he's back and he's played through the rest of the game. But for that quick little while, it did appear that Slafkovský was going to be down and out potentially for a little bit longer. It was a real awkward collision up along the boards, but he was okay. And then you saw the Slovaks kind of find their way back. They had a really good kind of stretch while he was down. And we'll show you a highlight from our stream, our live stream that we did today, where, of course, during that stretch, the Slovaks ended up scoring. Slovaks will break it back out. Dvorsky, another 2-on-1 chance. Dvorsky walks in, shoots, and scores. Dalibor Dvorsky makes it 4-0 for the Slovaks. Wow. Not sure anyone saw this kind of performance coming today, but the Slovaks now lead 4-0 with less than 10 minutes to play in the second period. So yes, that was a highlight from our stream today. If you have not already, please do hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you are notified when we do go live for these live streams. We likely will be live streaming tomorrow and potentially for the semifinals, maybe the bronze medal or gold medal, depending on how it all goes. So please do hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video as well if you have not already. But for this game between the Slovaks and the Germans, we talked about a little bit already with the way that the Slovaks play. It is extremely important to find success early, keep games closer than they should be, and then from there kind of find their way through. And that was the key to success for the Slovaks today, is they didn't let Germany into this game at all. Even when the Germans scored a goal, it was a pretty quick response from the Slovaks. And we saw that especially by the ability to shut down the Germans' top players. And whether that's Leon Draisaitl, Tim Stützle, a relatively quiet day from them, which then led to a lot of chances going back the other way for the Slovaks. And they capitalized on just about every single one they got. The Slovaks today did pull off an impressive victory. You can call it an upset if you'd like, but really this game was a toss-up from the start. A 6-2 win, kicking off the day for Slovakia over the Germans. Then on to the second game of the day with Canada and the Czechs. And I am kind of happy that this game was the second game of the day and not the last game of the day, because I have a feeling that this video would have went very differently. You look at these games, especially for a team like Canada, where they are expected on paper to not only win, but in many ways to dominate. And yes, the Canadians didn't necessarily dominate today, but the way that they played, I think, was one of the bigger takeaways, that they didn't play all that well. And they could have played better. That's not really what I'm saying. But they found ways to give themselves some problems. They overstacked lines, which was what the Czechs struggled with when they first played the Canadians back in the prelims, where it's very easy for a team like the Czechs, like Canada, to put out your defensive specialists against an overpowered line. And we saw that today when Crosby went down and they decided to go with that overpowered line with the Celebrini, McDavid, McKinnon line, which sometimes works. And it's great if you have two lines of offense because you can absorb one of those top lines of defense or that defensive forwards onto that set of forwards. But when you have really only one line of offense that's really going on a given day, it becomes a significant problem. And we saw that today. And yes, you get bailed out at the end by whether you want to call it officiating, whether you want to call it some goals or Mitch Marner becoming the hero yet again, repeating his efforts from the Four Nations, where remember back to that opening game, he won the game for Canada against the Swedes. But this one, I mean, it was a sloppy effort from the Canadians. You could tell that they came in expecting to win. They played them once already. They dominated them once already, and they were expecting to roll into this one as a relatively easy game. And it turned out to be a bit more of a competitive one than I think they were anticipating. We haven't seen this Canadian team face adversity yet in this tournament, so I guess good that they did face it now and not when the gold medal is on the line. But for the Canadians today, they pull out with the win. You have a huge goal late in the game by one of the guys who, once again, wasn't really expected to be on the top side of this team with Nick Suzuki, thrust it into a roll because Crosby went down. And then this whole game revolves around the fact that they got that goal, and you pull your goaltender, could go either way. But in the end, Canada pulls through a win in this quarterfinals against their demons in the Czechs. And by some miracle, they do come out and will advance to the semifinals. As for the Czechs today, and we've talked pretty extensively about this game for the Czechs, not only in yesterday's video, not only in the game when they last played Canada's video, but in their preview video, in the prediction video, and in the tournament preview video, where this game for me, whether it be Canada and the Czechs, was always a circled one. The Czechs are a team who have always caused problems for Canada, especially in recent years at these kind of tournaments, because of the fact that they play extremely structured and they know what they're doing. They're able to get some good goaltending when they need to. And that today was one of the biggest differences. Is you look at their first game versus their second game, the second game and today's game, you look for that matchup, and the reason why it was different was because A, they got secondary scoring, and B, they got goaltending in net. And Canada didn't face any secondary scoring in their game against the Czechs because the Czechs, similar to what Canada did today, they only loaded up one line. And in that first game, we saw the NHL line at the top, and then from there, it was a little bit more of a struggle to really get anything else going for the Czechs. But then we saw what happened today, and of course, you have the split up lines for the Czechs, a little bit more balance throughout the lineup, and you have realistically two big lines of players that could score goals at any given point. And then you have Canada, who is kind of the opposite, and they've gone back to that sort of perfection line or superpower line at the top, where if they don't get that goal, then all of a sudden it becomes significantly more harder to end up pulling off a win. And so the Czechs today, I was very impressed with them. And I mean, the score speaks for itself, but they played their best game today. They came oh so close multiple times in this one. Did it help with a little bit of reffing? Sure, but once again, that does go both ways today. And you can look at the weird penalty call on the cross-check or interference. Michael Kempney when he hit McKinnon from behind, which frankly I still don't know how that was called. Or the fact that, the Czechs played with 6 skaters in this game as well. And it was another day for the Czechs where they came very close, but unfortunately for them, just didn't quite get the result. And it's been a bit of that storyline throughout this tournament. They will be eliminated from this tournament, and Canada, by some miracle today, will move on to the semifinals. A 4-3 victory in overtime in this one, as we will now move to the third game of the day and another overtime game in this one where the Finns did take it 3-2. And this day has been a weird day. And it's been a weird day in the sense that favorites aren't really winning. Favorites, I guess most of them pulled out in the end. But the favorites in these games did not do what they were supposed to do. And this game, again, between Switzerland and Finland, a prime example of that. The Swiss go up early, 2-0 lead, and then the Finns you see them start to a little bit panic, start to really try and force it offensively. The Swiss, in many ways, just accepting that they want to play defensively, not really pushing the pace offensively very much. And then the question became for a team like the Finns is how long can you play defense against them before they break through? And we saw it pretty quickly, kind of that 5-minute mark with to go left in the third period is when the Finns got their first one, then they pulled their goalie, and the Swiss just looked flat as can be. The Finns get their second one, tie the game, and then overtime rolls around, and the Finns, very difficult to beat in an overtime type period, especially with how quick they are. Unfortunately for the Swiss, this one was just a bit of a tough showing late in this game, and they'll look back on this one and wonder why, and maybe ask themselves why or wish they didn't. But they played far too defensive when they had the lead. And it seems a bit counterintuitive. Yes, you go up in games, you want to play defense, and it seems reasonable. But at some point, you also need to go on the offensive attack. And for a team like the Swiss, where if they can pin teams like Finland in deep, causes the Finns to cause turnovers, it makes the Finns feel a little bit more uneasy. And that's where they really could have kind of pushed the pace a little bit more today. Unfortunately for them, didn't quite get that job done. Giannoni in net today was a key reason why this game stayed as close as it did right up until the end. But unfortunately for them, unfortunately for the Swiss, they just couldn't get the job done. A 3-2 win for Finland today. They will advance to the semifinals, where they will take on the Canadians. Then on to the last game of the day between the USA and Sweden. And it's another game where, today has been a great day. And it's one of those days that reminds you why Best on Best Hockey is, 1, amazing, 2, great to have back, and 3, it's so beautiful to see. A 2-1 win for the US over the Swedes in overtime. This game was one of the more defensive games. And similar to what happened with the Swedes, or similar to what happened with the Swiss, the Swedes went down relatively early in this game. Then the U.S. kind of packed it up and started to play their defensive system. And it became a little bit too defensive for the U.S. And yes, you look to the end of this game and the U.S. end up taking it. But you watch them with the lead and far too defensive, far too accepting that they're not going to play any more offense today. And that is a bit of a problem for them. And if you look to what's to come, whether you want to look at their game against the Slovaks, although once again, the U.S. likely are going to walk through the Slovak team tomorrow or in 2 days' time, they are going to eventually play either Canada or the Finns, likely going to be Canada. You look to that game, and if you play anything like you did today, if you hold the lead anything like you did today, you are going to get pummeled so badly that it's not even going to be funny. Because when you look at a Canadian team, if you want to play defense first, you have to be accepting of the fact that they're not going to let you come back the other way, especially for a team like the Canadians, where they are very good at and very structured with their offensive side. They know what they're doing. They know how to kind of cycle in passes where not necessarily that American team is going to be able to pick those off. It can become very frustrating and very difficult for a team like the U.S. to try and generate anything, and going back the other way is definitely going to be tricky, and it's only a matter of time before an offense like Canada blows you away. And so for the U.S. today, yes, they pick up the win. Yes, they end up pulling through against one of the hardest opponents they were going to play in the quarterfinals in the Swedes, but it's still a performance that I wouldn't say the U.S. is happy with. I don't think we have seen the best performance from this U.S. team yet at this tournament, which likely means it is around the corner. They do face a little bit more adversity today, but in reality, this U.S. team has faced adversity all tournament long, not necessarily to the same extent that Canada has, right? Where for Canada, this has really been the first sort of adversity they faced. For the U.S., it's been a little bit more in smaller dosages. Today, definitely a more big scale or wide scale kind of upset potential there. Of course, going up against the Swedes in overtime where it really could go either way. But in the end today for the U.S., they do pull out a big 2-1 victory in this one, and they will move to the semifinals where they will play the Slovak team. But as we will now move it over to the news, and we'll start here with the Slovaks with depth wins. And so for this team, for the Slovaks, they had 12 different players today record a point. And we talked about it coming into this game. It was going to be the battle between the Slovak depth and the German star talent. And the Slovak depth today really took this game and were the main reason why they ended up coming out with the win. And you look to those players and you look to some of, especially how deep that Slovak team is, they remind you a little bit of the U.S., not necessarily in that skilled sense, but in the way that there is no one line of offense that is going to pull their weight. They're going to have, and yes, Slavkovsky's had a good tournament, Dvorsky has as well, but they're going to have essentially 4 lines of offensive talent that can score at any given time, and we saw that today. A big win today for the Slovaks, all stemming from their depth. Depth does win today's game, which then leads us on to Germany with they are in need of stars. And we looked at this German team heavily reliant upon their stars, Leon Draisaitl, Tim Stützle, Moritz Seider, 3 guys that you really need to lead the charge. You can throw JJ Peterka in there as well. But for a team like Germany, if you don't get that star talent and that star talent production, it can become a very difficult game. We saw that today. We've seen that throughout this tournament. And I think one most notable game of that is in their game against the U.S., where Kachuk got in Draisaitl's head, and he hasn't really played the same since. And so for a team like the Germans, it's a real tough game for them today. A relatively embarrassing loss, too, I might add. A 6-2 loss in this one. But we will see if they're going to be able to bounce back as we head into a Men's World Championships run coming up very shortly. Should be interesting to see if they're going to be able to, how many of their NHL guys are going to get over, whether or not there's going to be any sort of drama going around there. But you look to it, the German team this year falling quite a bit short of that quarterfinal game. They were hoping to have a chance to play for a medal, especially when they saw their draw. Not in the cards this year. Should be interesting to see what is to come for this German team. Today, they were in need of their stars. And then to Canada with Mitchie. A huge goal for Mitch Marner, who once again scored the OT winner for Canada and showed why he's one of the greatest players to ever wear the maple leaf. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Toronto Maple Leafs fans. I am so sorry for that. But it is a beautiful part about having your plethora of talent on a team like Canada. We saw today Mitch Marner with his clutch side come out yet again. Unfortunately for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the NHL, couldn't quite get that same performance. But we will move on to the Czechs. They were right there. And it was another game and another tournament for the Czechs where they have reminded the hockey world once again that they're not a joke at these tournaments. You have to take them seriously. And even though we look back to the prelims, Canada blew them out, they were always going to be a tough team to go out and try and beat, especially in the knockout stages. You have Lukas Dostal, who had an amazing tournament. He had an amazing game today, too, where kind of reminded you of that World Championship run where he was the only reason why, he was one of the only reasons why the Czechs got as far as they did. And so that's the kind of performances you need. It's a good reminder for the rest of the international hockey world who might be a little bit more concealed to the fact that there is talent outside of the Big Four. And I thought today was a real good example of that. The Czechs are right there. Then to the Finns it was a memorable game. And it kind of reminds you a little bit about that World Championship game where they faced off against France. Think back to that game. France scored an empty net goal. They went up 3-1. Then Finland scores 2 goals with the goalie pulled, kind of that last-ditch effort, ties the game and goes out and wins it in overtime. A relatively similar feel, too, I might add, to this one here against the Swiss, where the Swiss played so much defense, it was only a matter of time before the Finns came back. And unfortunately for the Swiss, just a little bit too much time on the clock to try and shut it down defensively. They did end up losing out today with the 3-2 overtime loss in this one, which brings us to the Swiss, but they choked it. And there's not much to kind of beat around the bush there. It was a tough game to watch for the Swiss and one that kind of slipped through their fingers. It was only a matter of time that it was going to come, and you could see it coming. But unfortunately for them, just weren't able to get the job done today. They are eliminated at this year's tournament. Then on to the Swedes with 1 goal. And the 1 goal topic of the news strikes yet again on these videos, and for good reason. And you think about it for the Swedes, 1 goal away from not having to play the U.S. in the quarterfinals, 1 goal away from having to play the Germans in the quarterfinals, 1 goal away from likely going on to play for a medal, and who knows, maybe even going for gold at this tournament. And it's a very tough game for the Swedes to come out with the win in. The U.S. team, arguably the first or second best ranked team at this tournament. You can pick your poison. I know I'm now leaning to the Canadian side, but realistically, this U.S. team is very good on paper. They have what it takes. We haven't seen their best game yet, but it is on its way, and likely we'll see it if Canada does end up meeting them for gold. And so for the U.S., for Swedes, for the Swedes in particular, the 1 goal at this tournament has been a very important topic. Goal differential has been huge. Goal differential across the board. And even looked at today's game where the Swedes find 1 goal in this one, and the complete outcome of the outcome of this game is completely different. And so for the Swedes today, 1 goal yet again seems to strike back. Unfortunately for them, just can't quite get the job done. Then to the U.S. with they parked the bus today. And for our U.S. friends and for us North Americans who call it soccer, this is a soccer term. It means to play basically only focus on defense. And we saw that happen today with the U.S. And it wasn't great, because what happens when you only focus on playing defense is that you're going to get dominated by better teams. You're going to get dominated by teams like the Swedes. And the amount of offensive pressure that teams like the Swedes, like Canada, like Finland too, will put on that kind of pressure. The Slovaks will do it a little bit as well, is they're going to eventually score on you. And so, yes, it's great to park the bus. Yes, it's good to get up in leads. But at the end of the day, you can't just keep playing defense. Something to keep an eye on going forward in this tournament, especially as they go out and play teams like Canada, like the Finns across the other side of the group, because they are going to dominate you. The U.S. today did park the bus, maybe a cause for concern going forward, but we will now shift over to our playoff picture, where we will, of course, see the semi-final matchups. Canada taking on the Finns, USA taking on Slovakia. And in this one, on either of these 2 games, it's going to be another great day of action. And the Canadians and the Finns, 2 teams that match up very differently to one another. You have Canada a little bit more on that offensive side. Yes, they take care of their defensive side too, but more so going to be pushing the pace offensively. The Finns, much more defensive team. We've already seen them upset a team like the Swedes, who employ a relatively similar tactic style to the Canadian team. And so we will see whether or not for the Finns, if they're going to be able to pull off that big upset. We think back to 4 Nations. Advantage does go to the Canadian team, but you think to the end of that game where the Finns nearly pulled off one of the most miraculous comebacks we've seen in quite a while. It's going to be a tight one, right? And you look to the Finns, every player but 1 NHL guy. For Canada, you have a lot of injuries right now. McKinnon looks injured. Crosby, we'll see what he's up to. That's going to come out over the next few days. But it will be interesting to see, to say the very least, for this Canadian team, if they're going to be able to go in and beat the Finns, because the Finns are a good team. Yes, Canada should be the favorite in this game, but realistically, it could go either way, and that's part of the beauty of any game you play against the Finns, because they are a relentless team, and they'll stop at nothing to go out and get what they want, and they want to go play for a gold medal. And so for the Finns, it's going to be a very fascinating game to watch. We'll see whether or not they are going to be able to pull off the huge upset and take down the behemoth in Canada, but one to definitely watch for. The other semifinal matchup between the USA and Slovakia. You look to this one, likely going to be a U.S.-dominated game, but at the same time, you can't overestimate or underestimate a team like the Slovaks. They've shown so far at this tournament that they are a team to beat, and they're going to be a competitive team at this tournament. We'll see whether or not they're going to be able to pull off that upset against the U.S. You look to their key players to be the key players. You look to their depth to go mano-a-mano with the U.S. team, but unfortunately, in the end, for the Slovaks, I don't really see it happening. I think you can look to the U.S.'s game against Denmark, where the Slovaks and the Danes relatively similar in terms of their own structure. The Slovaks a little bit more on that trap style type game. The Danes a little bit more on kind of a more offensive transition type game. That's where it's going to be for the US, is if they're able to penetrate it, get to the middle of the ice and take high quality chances and bury those chances. That's where a team like the US can be very successful and likely where you will see this game trend. But if they struggle to get to the middle, the Slovaks are able to kind of limit the chances to the outside. Halavai can have an excellent game. This one wouldn't surprise me to see it go the other way. But in realistic terms, it's more likely to see that the US really blow this team out than the Slovaks pull off the upset. But I've been wrong before. I know our Slovak friends are already marching to the comments, coming for my head because I said that the Germans were going to beat them in the last video, and now it's time for another upset. But I will say that, yes, the Slovaks have a good team this year, but the US is just that much better. It's going to be a real tough game. We'll see which team can come out on top. But we will shift over to the semifinal time slots, semifinal games, February the 20th, so not tomorrow's games, but the day after. We will have Canada taking on the Finns at 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time. The prediction for this one, I am going to take Canada in a 4-2 margin. The Finns, a very difficult team to blow out. Yes, we saw the Slovaks have their way with them earlier in the tournament, but you look at the way that game played out, the Finns kind of hanging around as best they could before the Slovaks kind of found those goals and turned the tide. But realistically, the Finns a tough team to blow out. Even the Slovaks didn't really do it. They got some goals, but that game played out a lot more favorable to the Finns. I do think this game is going to be extremely tight. I think you're going to see that fourth goal for the Canadians be the empty net. I could also see it being a 4-2 with the extra empty net, making it a 5-2 game. It'll be somewhere in that range. We'll see whether or not they're going to be able to come out on top in that one. Then to the other game between the USA and Slovakia, where I'm going to take the US here 6-2 the final. I do expect the US to really dominate this game. If they start to do what they did today and play a very kind of trap it away system or that defensive style to park the bus, they're going to lose this game. And you can't play that against teams like the Slovaks. We saw that earlier in the tournament with the Finns, where the Finns tried to play their defensive system and they just got too much northbound action from the Slovak team. And unfortunately, when you get pemmed in your own end against a team that can score goals, they're going to score. I don't necessarily see that happening in this game against the Slovaks and the US, because the US, a team that's going to be designed for that more offensive type game, especially if they can get on the board early in this one, look for them to really run away with it. But if the Slovaks can keep it tight, the tighter these games go, especially as an underdog type team, the better chance that that upset team is going to have. The more belief they get, the better they play, and that kind of rolling snowball continues down the hill. Should be an interesting one, but as far as predictions go, 6-2 win for the USA over the Slovaks, 4-2 win for Canada over the Finns. Your game of the day at 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time between Canada and Finland. But that will do it today for our scheduled content. We will now move over to live questions. We do put out a poll on our Twitter, X, and YouTube platform asking for your questions and thoughts on the day. We have quite a few to get through today. We'll start with one from Nick, the IIHF fan, who says, for Canada, Czechia, I'm exhausted. I don't think I'd ever gotten that close to a heart attack towards the end of the game, even when Canada was repeatedly going to overtime in Men's World Championship quarterfinals from 2018 to 2022. And that is very fair, and I think you share a lot of the same sentiments that a lot of the people across the nation here in Canada can also feel. And I know for myself, it was a stressful game to watch because you knew what this Czech team was capable of. You know, you, especially for this channel where we do our research, we don't just take into the account that, well, Czechia wasn't at Four Nations, so they're not a good team. No, for this Czech team, they're on the rise. Yes, they got blown out off the start, but that was more of an upset, I'd say, than how close this game was today, because the Czechs are a team on the rise. They have some really good pieces in place. We've seen them play well on the international stage. We've seen their goaltending perform exceptionally well on the global stage. This Czech team is one that was always poised to be a problem for the Canadians, even in their own group, and Canada got a little bit lucky earlier in the tournament that they caught their goaltending on a bad day, and they really didn't look back from there. But for the Canadians today, it was a very stressful game, and Fortunately for us Canadians, they did pull through. The city and the country will live on for at least 2 more games at this tournament, and we'll see if they're going to be able to go for gold. We will now go to the second comment from today from Globo SVK, who says, so excited for my Slovak guys, hoping we can score an upset and go home with a medal, but even if we don't, this team has already achieved more than anyone could reasonably ask for. Czechia and Switzerland being so close to an upset was also great to see, and as of writing this, Sweden and USA are playing a tied game. I'm glad to see the underdogs aren't just rolling over and giving up, and even if Canada and the US are the most likely to make the finals, they'll have a hard fight to get there. Also, one thing I wanted to point out that I really enjoy about the Olympics are the boards. Just a nice Olympic design instead of that disgusting digital ads you see in the NHL. And I think that's a sentiment we can all get behind when it comes to the advertising. You know, this, in one of the beauties about IIHF and the way that it works is, especially at the Olympic level, is they don't really work with the ads as much, and IIHF a little bit more so in that ad space, but in the Olympics, no ads, you get whatever you want to put on those boards, and it is amazing to see. And I know Jeremy Swayman and the US team might disagree with a little bit of the color scheme of that, but it is great to see that you can put out anything on those boards that you want, and the colors look great. The way that the boards look is great. Instead of that boring old white and yellow and red, the fact that they can kind of design it to a way that looks cool, I really enjoyed that, and that's one of the best parts. At least one of my highlights from this tournament is just how well those boards have looked. But also, when it comes to the Slovaks, should be interesting to see whether or not they are going to be able to kind of pull off that big upset. Definitely something to keep an eye on there. Then we'll go to Clove Kobekny 2329, who says, I was blown away by the Czechs. What a play. And that's exactly right. And you look at it for the Czech team. And yes, coming into the tournament, you can go rewatch our Team Czechia preview video because we talked about it. They are a team at this tournament who has a legitimate chance to go out and win a gold medal. They need to win 1, maybe 2 games as far as those key games types go. They end up in a tough one against Canada today. Unfortunately for them, just find themselves on the wrong side of it. But one that very well could have went either way. And for the Czechs, they played very well today. And that isn't necessarily the surprise of this one. I thought that as much as, yes, they played well, they played significantly better than the 5-0 loss at the start of the tournament for them, which was definitely a tough game to come back from. But we also saw that this Czech team was different today. You could see them even walking out on the ice, that they weren't messing around today. And earlier in the tournament, there was a little bit more of that lackadaisical side, not necessarily dialed in yet for the Olympics. Today, they walked out with a purpose and they executed their game plan. Really good to see for this Czech team. We will now go to the next one with Pico Sick SK, who says, what an exciting day. No one believes in Slovakia, and yet we move on. I am ready for another upset. Czechia showed us that Canada is not invincible. Finland made an insane comeback, and we'll see who enters semifinals from the last game. Can't wait for more. And that's exactly right. And I have to say, I am very excited for these semifinals because teams like the one behind me, like the Slovaks, are poised for some sort of funky type game. We haven't got the majority of our upsets quite yet at this tournament. We had a few, and maybe more so on the scores, I'd say, more than anything else. And I mean, even today, you have the Swiss nearly upset the Finns. The Finns pulled together a last-minute comeback. The Czechs lead for most of today against Canada. The Canadians put together a last-minute comeback. You know, the U.S. leads against the Swedes. Not really kind of that upset, but close enough. Swedes put together a late kind of game upset. And I'm excited to see what the Slovaks can do now, because they are a team at this tournament that is on the rise and they are poised for some kind of upset. And I'm very excited, at the very least, to see how far they can go now, because sky's the limit. They have a guaranteed chance to play for a medal. In a very realistic sense, it's likely going to be against the Finns. If we're talking kind of probability-wise, it should be against the Finns. The Finns are a team that the Slovaks have already beaten once at this tournament. It's going to be a tough second go-around at it, but they do have the potential there. Should definitely be interesting to see for the Slovak squad. And then we'll go to our last comment of today from HitboxBoy2899, who says, what do you think of the reffing? I just can't stomach it. The Czechs got some insane calls, while the Canadians were left off with insane penalties. The reffing has been horrible the whole time, but today felt just insulting, to be honest. And what I'd say is, yes, I know the officiating today was pretty bad, and there's no getting around that. But it was extremely bad for both sides. And whether you want to take the goal where the Czechs had 6 players on the ice, whether you want to take the fact that the penalty that Kempny took by shoving McKinnon down to the ice ended up resulting in a goal, it was one of those games that I just thought it was very poorly officiated. And we've been very high on the officiating so far at this tournament. They've been very consistent. They've been consistently not great, but at least you know what's going to be called. Today's game threw it a little bit into that wrench where I would prefer just nothing being called rather than the kind of spot and start type calls that we saw today. Some really questionable penalties, especially late into that game where, especially on the Canadian side, and that's where I would agree with kind of that sentiment earlier with, for the Czechs, they did definitely get kind of robbed in this because they should have had a power play going into that last minute of the game, going into overtime period as well, where the Canadians were hooking and holding, and just the Czechs didn't get the call. And it was one of those games where every call counts, and you have to at some point kind of bury the whistles, but unfortunately that hadn't been set and established early in the game. And so yes, you absolutely want the call there, and yes, you probably deserve the call there, but they didn't get it today. And unfortunately for the Czechs, just kind of falling on the wrong side of a few tough calls was the major difference in this one. But semi-final action coming right around the corner. Some big games coming up. The women's tournament concluding tomorrow, so be sure to come back for that, as we will break it all down, as well as our semi-final bronze medal and gold medal recaps all coming around the corner. Be sure to be on the lookout for live streams, as we will be jumping on those as the tournament progresses. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you really sort of subscribing, tell all your friends, comment down below your thoughts on quarterfinal action for the men's Olympic hockey event. Until next time, see you.